Okay, so now without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome today's speaker, Britt Calvert, Vice President with our Ipsos Innovation Practice. Britt, you have the floor.
Amazing. Thank you, Ellen, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We have a session that I'm very excited about as it talks about my passions both in package valuation as well as sustainability. So a lot of good content to cover off on today. And with that, I do want to give you a little bit of an idea of what's ahead. So we're going to start out with just a basic introduction, not only to how we will be talking about sustainability for the remainder of this presentation, but also to the work that we've done, this research on research. We're going to start off with some cross-category findings, so kind of the sum of everything we've learned across categories, but we will also be diving into category-specific overviews, in which we'll be talking about how sustainabilities talk about, how consumers talk about sustainability in these spaces, comments around packaging format, product formulation, and for each, very excited to celebrate the leaders of the pack. So those package products which are seen by consumers to be the most sustainable in their category of those we've tested. We'll of course cover off by talking about some implications and actions that can come out of all of this wealth of information we'll share today. So with that, I think at the risk of sounding trite, we do need to start by making sure that we're all talking about sustainability in the same way. And I always think it's not a great sign for the simplicity of a concept when the root word of the definition is in the definition itself, right? So we see that Merriam-Webster uses the word sustain to define sustainability, and we're instead going to focus on this middle definition, which is being a method of harvesting or using a resource so that the resource is not depleted or permanently damaged. And I think this is a good place to start, right? It is very comparable to how the UN thinks about sustainability, but I think when we think about sustainability in this manner, a lot of times we're primarily thinking about environmental sustainability. So eco-friendly products or not using resources that damage the earth. And while that's incredibly important and perhaps top of mind to our consumers, the view that we at Ipsos take on sustainability is much broader. So while planet remains an important pillar of sustainability, there's also things that we need to think about when talking about creating sustainable businesses. And that's, of course, people being a touchstone of businesses in terms of fairer societies, whether that's treating our citizens fairly or our employees fairly, as well as prosperity, right? If the goal is to create prosperous businesses and societies, it's natural to see that we need a people to do that with and a planet to do that on. So Ipsos really does think about sustainability with these 3 Ps, people, planet, and prosperity. And just for fun, I'll throw in a 4th P, which is purpose. Purpose is a word that sometimes we use interchangeably with sustainability because it encompasses all of these same matters, while perhaps being a little less focused on just environmental sustainability, which is where sometimes we can see consumers focusing their time. So we are not new to the ESG space. We've done a lot of work in sustainability, not only towards how consumers think about sustainability, but how this can then be integrated back into your organizations. And for our purposes today, however, it's really imperative to understand how real people, not any of us on this call during our day jobs, think about sustainability, right? We want to know how our families, our friends, our loved ones, and those we've never met think about sustainability in order to make sure that we're making the right decisions for our business. So when looking through global trends data, we know that real people want to act responsibly, right? People generally want to make the right choice, even if maybe at the end of the day they don't. In addition, people generally think that they can make a difference. And a large part of this willingness to make a difference is the belief of a collective effort, right? So a lot of people making small changes can make a large impact. And what's important to note on this last point is that it's not just, these everyday people, our citizens, our consumers, who need to be making these collective efforts. They expect the government to help. They expect manufacturers and service companies to help. They expect this to be a true collective. There's responsibility to be shared. Yet, while we all have the best of intentions, right, we talk about something a lot called the say-do gap. And while at Ipsos we reflect that's a real thing, that people don't always do what they say they're going to do, we think that this is a little bit of a broader issue to tackle. And at its foundation is the notion of what we call the believe true gap. So to illustrate this, we've asked consumers, thinking about specifically environmental sustainability, what actions could they take that would have the biggest impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions? And what we see is within that top 3, 2 of those are focused on packaging of products, whether that's recycling the packaging they use or buying products with less packaging overall. However, when we compare those to the reality of the situation, the true impact of each of those measures, we see that things like recycling and using less packaging are pretty far down on the list. Whereas items like number 1, living car-free, or number 7, having a vegan diet, those are seen as significantly, like they would make a significantly lower impact, right? So there are major misconceptions around product packaging and its importance to climate change, but how people can have an impact overall. And this is what we call the believe true gap. What people believe they can do versus what they can actually do don't always line up. And with that very important point in mind, our focus today is going to be all about perceived sustainability. So I am a consumer researcher, I am a packaging fanatic, but I am not necessarily a sustainable packaging development professional, right? I do not claim to know the exact carbon impact of everything that we're going to talk about today, though I think I probably know more than the average bird. But what we are going to be talking about today are just consumer perceptions, regardless of whether or not those perceptions are true in reality. And while throughout the course of this presentation, you're going to see and hear firsthand how consumers are talking about sustainability in these different categories, I did give AI a go at it first and had it create this image for me. We see a lot of green space. I think that vibes with what we know about consumers and their perceptions, but also a lot of clutter. Because this is a big, fuzzy, complex topic. And I do think that while we're maybe not are going to get to the pinpoint end of it today, we're going to do a lot to start to unravel it. So to do that and to start doing this, we did conduct research on research to understand exactly how in various categories people perceive sustainability. We conducted over 4,000 interviews looking at 48 different product SKUs across 4 product categories. And those are the ones we are going to talk about today. They are beer, salty snacks, laundry detergent, and body soap. So a spread of consumable versus more household-focused categories to hopefully find trends within and across. To do this, we used our tool called FastPack, and this is an agile approach to general pack screening, not necessarily dedicated to sustainability, though we did use it here because what we wanted to do was really replicate the way that consumers would shop at shelf. So we didn't want to bring in concepts and, outside communication or things that an advertisement might tell us. We wanted consumers to only use the packaging itself, as well as any, incoming perceptions they had about the categories or brands to frame the exercise. So while FastPack tells us a lot, it gives us an idea of standout, whether packs can break through the clutter, what people like or dislike on a specific pack. What we're really going to be focusing on today are the kind of more meta trends as related to associations, specifically around sustainability, as well as, of course, we want to put our money where our mouth is, drivers of purchase, key drivers of demand. So really what you can expect us to be focusing on today is what factors drive perceived sustainability, and do those perceptions ultimately impact consumers' likelihood to purchase? So we're first going to set the stage by looking kind of across all of the categories. And in doing that, it's important to keep in mind that we do measure purpose in two distinct ways. So first, we want to quantify the idea of sustainability associated with any given SKU, right? How sustainable do I think it is? We then, though, take that a step further by asking consumers to categorize that purpose, to categorize that sustainability. So does it make the world more equitable and fair? Does it have health and well-being improvement effects? Or is this really something that's all about the environment? By layering these two together, we can get a little bit of a deeper understanding of what consumers are thinking, and to some interesting ends. When we look at pure quantification, so the levels of sustainability associated with various products in various categories, we don't see any huge trends, right? Things are relatively flat. And if you look at this average index point of 100, 3 of our 4 categories, beer, soap, and laundry, really do crowd around that middle point. Salty snacks, interestingly, trend a little bit lower, meaning they're generally perceived to be a little less sustainable than the other categories. However, these relatively flat scores suggest that this might not be something that consumers have a super strong opinion on at this point. Where things get a little bit more interesting, however, is that differences do arise in how purpose is categorized. So if we take a look at the specific categories as these various lines on this chart, we see that beer and laundry, these blue and purple lines, trend towards helping to protect the environment, where snacks and soap are much more likely to be considered having an impact related to health and well-being. Definitely makes sense in terms of snacks for me, and I think we'll discuss a little bit more where this could be coming from when we get to our soap section. So with that, we're going to dive right in, and first we'll be munching on some salty snacks. And each of these sections will start with an overview of how consumers define sustainability in this category. So the way that we did this was simply asking consumers to write an open end about sustainability in each relevant category. We then analyze those to look for major trends and themes, as well as provide you some succinct examples of what those quotes could be. And primarily top of mind when it comes to sustainability in salty snacks is eco-friendly packaging. So there's lots of mentions of recyclable, compostable, or biodegradable packaging, as well as ethical sourcing of ingredients. So things like fair sourced, non-GMO, as well as some more, I'd say, savvier consumers themselves noted ethical working conditions for people harvesting those crops rather than the crops being sourced from sustainable locations. Here is where we get back into that idea of health impact and its perceptions of sustainability. And what's really interesting here that came up specifically when talking about salty snacks is this idea that they want to maintain a really delicious flavor profile while making that product healthier. And this is something we'll see again and again where consumers say yes to sustainability, but first and foremost, only if it's going to give them the efficacy, the functionality, whatever need they're fulfilling with that product to begin with. Something that popped up was the notion of longevity or shelf life. So not only the product staying fresh and not going stale quickly, meaning we wouldn't have to dispose of it quickly, but also this idea it lasts longer, it gets me full faster, and it's going to keep me satiated, right? So again, what is a snack meant to do? It's meant to satisfy. And to that point, people want something that tastes good. Salty snacks tend to be for something craveable. And this person said, like, I just need a good taste. And if it does that, it works for me, right? So we can't forget the importance of this. And looking by the numbers, we first took a look at the packaging format itself. When we were looking through the open ends, a lot of notions of something being recyclable or biodegradable was important, but not specific mentions of materials. So we took a look at this ourselves, and we found that in general, paper packaging is perceived to be the most sustainable when it comes to salty snacks. Perhaps not super surprisingly, poly or plastic bags are lagging a little bit behind average, with glass jars actually lagging the furthest behind. A little bit interesting because of the packages that we included in this study, unbeknownst to consumers, the glass jars were the only ones that are completely, fully recyclable. So this obviously goes to show that consumers are thinking more about the product and benefits and transportation rather than just this packaging format, right? If we go on to overlay demand, so these are, again, the drivers of purchase, we see that, yes, while poly bags fall behind in terms of sustainability, there's not really a difference in terms of whether people plan to purchase them in the future. So they remain craveable, right? They're what people expect and what people like, and they're not necessarily losing anything by perhaps being perceived to be less sustainable. When we look at the kind of claims on pack, we find that, interestingly enough, though people made mentions of health and ingredients when talking about sustainability, we don't necessarily see any huge additional benefit for the products that had some kind of no artificial claim or real simple ingredients claim. What we do see, though, is that demand increases, showing that while maybe this is not top of mind with sustainability, people are looking for this kind of health-focused, real food-based snack. And I think also something that went against my hypothesis is that while fried snacks might get a little bit of a bad rap as being less healthy, they actually were not perceived as less sustainable than those baked or roasted snacks, right? And of course, people are going to be more likely to purchase those as well. So very excited to present our first leader of the pack. And just to reiterate, right, in each of the categories, we included about 12 packages that spanned a good breadth of category factors. And the ones that we'll be showing on these slides are those that are rated as most sustainable by consumers, so which achieved the highest sustainability ratings. And in the case of salty snacks, the winner is Cheetos Puffs, simply Cheetos Puffs, right? So what's interesting is that we did include as kind of an A-B comparison, both simply Cheetos as well as regular Cheetos, and this one was deemed to be more sustainable. You'll notice in some of the quotes on the right, we're starting to get this hint that people can't help but make a comparison to the original Cheetos, traditional Cheetos. And when we look at this pack specifically, I think there's a lot we can take away in terms of what might be driving those sustainability perceptions. For instance, we've got the white color blocking, which allows us to kind of break up that chip aisle in a way, given there's not a ton of white packaging, but also connote this notion of purity in the ingredients, which is further driven home, right, by this image itself of the cheese and of the product. So this is a great case study where we see, Cheetos using their well-known, well-loved brand assets, but including things that cue health in an interesting way. We'll also be overlaying from our analysis the areas on pack that consumers liked the best, as well as found most unique as a kind of additional lens by which to look through these sustainability ratings. And what we see is that what consumers liked most on this pack was actually our friend Chester here, right? They know this mascot, they recognize this mascot, and this really quickly calls them back to the Cheetos brand, which they have a lot of good experience with, right? And when it comes to what's unique and what's different, it is specifically this pure deliciousness, simply text. So this text is done beautifully, not only because it fits in well aesthetically with the pack, but if we notice this kind of plant-based logo of the leaf among the P, this is going to additionally cue perceptions of natural that will help us, associate with the claims of no artificial that are further down on the pack. So this is a great example of how we can continue to offer a crave-worthy addition to our portfolio, but in a way who people are going to give it credit for being definitely more health focused and also more sustainable. So we're going to dive into beer next. We'll wash down those salty snacks. And what does sustainability mean in beer? We saw a lot about eco-friendly production in terms of it doesn't pollute the environment, it's using less water. But a real big trend here was the notion of taste and consistency. So not only does this brew have to taste great, but I want it to taste the same every time I drink it. Again, kind of going back to this idea that a snack has to be tasty, so does a beer. In addition, folks want to see quality ingredients. Something that popped up was the idea of local ingredients here, which we'll keep in mind for later, as well as getting back to this idea of longevity or shelf life. They don't want something that's going to get flat easily, go bad if they leave it in the fridge a little bit too long, and a new kind of component here with affordable pricing. When it comes to sustainability in beer specifically, something we didn't see in snacks, people did mention something that they could afford. That's a good price, perhaps good deals and good promotions. And when it comes to beer, glass bottles beat cans in terms of their perceptions of sustainability. The reality is not so cut and dry, right? It can take a lot of resources to create either bottles or cans from new materials. We can create these from recycled materials, which is better, but there's also differing carbon footprints in terms of the shipment of these types of things. So it's not necessarily cut and dry in the industry, but in terms of consumers, they definitely find the glass bottles to be a little bit more sustainable. When we also overlay our demand drivers, this gap gets even wider. I do want to say here, though, that this is at least likely driven in part by brand perceptions. I think that some of us know that occasionally glass bottles will be seen as more premium than cans, and I do think that that could be playing into these demand scores here. What I found very interesting is that imported beers were actually found to be more sustainable and higher in demand than domestic beers, which goes a bit against what we saw earlier with some consumers talking about, that great idea of local hops. Though I do think it's fair to say that if something's coming from Europe or from California, where I'm sitting in Chicago, it can sometimes feel equally far away, right? Also worth noting is that we did include a few seltzers in the mix, and despite them having, similar ABVs and calorie counts to the light beers included in this research, they did pop in terms of being more sustainable and more in demand. So in this case, you'll see that rather than one singular leader of the pack, we actually had two SKUs which rated as most sustainable by consumers. The first one being Truly, specifically with this black cherry variety. And you'll see that kind of one of the themes that came across here was that Truly can sometimes feel, or seltzers in general, can feel like a bit of a lighter option, right? This person mentioned it's not too hard on the body, which I think is probably top of mind for many folks as, lower alcohol lifestyles are becoming more and more common. In addition, we see Corona, and anyone who's, at all familiar with the beer industry knows how Corona has taken a stand in terms of environmental sustainability specifically, ensuring to help clean beaches and things like that. And we see that come out here. People mention that Corona makes me think of Mexico and beaches. It makes me want to go on vacation. And let's take a look at, again, the specific components on these packs that are really driving appeal. So for Truly, the most liked element on this pack was the black cherry imagery. People thought it looked really good and really refreshing, and people thought this flavor name was very unique. So these combined, I think, make for an interesting proposition. But my hypothesis is also that the cherries on can, the focus on ingredients, like we saw with this Simply Cheetos packaging focus on cheese, this is cueing, if not where the cherry juice itself came from, the inspiration for that cherry flavor. A little bit of a different story when we look at Corona, in that, of course, the Corona Extra brand name is the biggest asset on the pack, but it's also what consumers chose as what they like and what they find unique, right? This definitely just hints that people are calling upon all of the positive associations they already have with Corona, when talking about what they like about it. Classic look, looks slick. But again, this notion of coming up that it's a good beer, I want to drink it on the beach. Can't argue with that. Sounds pretty good right now. We're going to switch gears a little bit, moving away from our consumables and into the body soap category. You'll notice that this is another one. All of these have been our AI generated images, and this one particularly, given the interesting spelling, did tickle me quite a bit. So in body soap, first and foremost, people are talking about eco-friendly ingredients. So sourcing ingredients from responsible suppliers, replace those resources that are harvested, right? This makes good sense, along with also eco-friendly packaging. So packaging that's recyclable. Someone here mentions refills, right? Something that we're starting to see more of in this space. Again, coming back to longevity, people want a product that is going to make them feel cleaner, smell cleaner longer, but also, interestingly, last a long time before I need to buy something new, right? I want this product to work for me for a while. Perhaps that's to save money, but also to save whatever packaging material I'm using. People also talked quite a bit about eco-friendly production methods, so in a way that leaves a low carbon footprint and not a huge impact on the environment, as well as, once again, we see this notion of affordable pricing. People want something that works well, that has a high quality, but they don't want to pay too much for that. And what we start to see is that consumers are open to refillable body care. In this set of products, we included more traditional formats like bar soap as well as body wash in a plastic bottle, but we also included some refillable products, so specifically in plastic as well as aluminum. And while consumers offer plastic refills, kudos for these efforts, aluminum does not get the same credit. And this could just be perhaps that given aluminum is not a material that many of us use or expect in the shower as of yet, this could be an instance where that's just perhaps a step too far for some people. And we see this as well in the demand scores associated. There's quite a lot of excitement around the idea of a plastic refill with, I believe, the highest demand score we've seen yet. But that same credit is not given to our poor aluminum refills. Again, just kind of showing that in this case, combining something known with something new might offer benefits to the consumers in a way that makes adopting this new innovation a little bit more appealing. In addition, when we look at the kind of formulation and claims on these packages, we see that gentle formulations, those that are dermatologically recommended, as well as fair trade ingredients, definitely give us a boost in terms of perceived sustainability, right? What's interesting is that when specific plant-based ingredients are mentioned, that's a little bit of a boost. However, we don't see the same benefit when looking at claims like no sulfates, no parabens. So in this case, it's kind of more of the additive or the things that are present that are helping more so than the things that are missing. And to that point, I again excited to introduce the leader of the pack, the product deemed most sustainable by consumers in body soap, which is a Dove body wash concentrate. So something that we'll see kind of similar to what we saw with Simply Cheetos is this idea that an established company is trying to come up with something new and different and sustainable. People think that this looks really premium, right? As many of Dove's products do, as well as they like the fresh, clean, and uncluttered design. And when we look at specific components of this package that are driving liking, it really does come down to that Dove brand equity. People love Dove, it's a trusted brand, but specifically people mention the notion that, you know, they back up their products, we would trust whatever they created. And what they find to be most unique about this product is, I'm sure not a surprise, is the idea that this is a body wash concentrate. And that's exciting, that's unique, and people do love the refillable notion. But what's interesting here is there seems to be some hesitation about the concentrate notion, the idea of adding your own water. And this is something that I think right now may not be the category norm, though this is definitely the way things are moving. But it's interesting how, helping consumers take these stepwise actions by giving them a brand they know, giving them a format they know, can help to kind of nudge people closer to making the more sustainable choice. In this case, too, it doesn't help that people think it might be cheaper due to it being a refill container, which is also an additional benefit that people are looking for if they're trading up from their day-to-day lives. We're now going to go ahead and finish our chores by talking about laundry detergent. In this case, this one is biodegradable, but I think that's supposed to mean biodegradable. We'll see if AI is on the right track with consumers. So consumers are definitely thinking about environmental impact when it comes to sustainability in the laundry space. Specifically, this one person made a comment, not only in the way that this is produced, right, but I want to know that whatever I'm washing down my drain is not going to leave a huge chemical trace. I don't want this to be detrimental. In addition, there were mentions of packaging in this space, though interestingly, really focused on the idea of minimal packaging. So some people talked about limited plastic, limited non-recyclable materials, but moreover, people were looking for just less packaging in general, whatever that was made of. In addition, of course, people want this to be efficient and effective, right? If they're buying laundry detergent, even if it is the more sustainable option, it's got to work. It's got to take away their stains. It's got to make sure that their clothes don't stink at the end of the cycle. But people also mention the notion that they would love something that allows for less water usage. So maybe not only the product itself is more sustainable, but allows them to incorporate this in their routine in a more sustainable way. Lots of mentions as well about natural ingredients, right? So things that feel natural, come from nature, not synthetic. As well as, again, people want their products to last. So that could mean my clothes smell great until they come out of the closet, but more often this meant I don't want to have to go to the store and buy another big jug in just a few weeks. So I should be able to get a lot of bang for the buck with this product. And what's interesting when we looked at this by format is that laundry sheets, which are a new format for many, really top the charts in terms of perceived sustainability. So for any of you who aren't familiar with this, they're now making dissolvable little sheets of detergent that usually come packaged in a small cardboard box. And these are outpacing powder, even in terms of their perceived sustainability. Again, likely related to that idea of really minimal packaging that this comes in, as opposed to things like pods or liquid, which come in much larger containers that require a lot more space to be disposed of. When we look at demand, though, we see that perhaps less so than the other categories, there's not necessarily a huge linkage between what is perceived most sustainable and what is perceived most in demand. In this case, the powder and pods top the chart in terms of what people would purchase, perhaps likely driven by, familiarity. A lot of people are already using these and loving these. There might be a little more uncertainty around a new format like sheets. When we look at the claims on pack and how those impact sustainability, we see that claims like bio-based and natural, whether that's natural essences, ingredients, fragrances, do boost perceived sustainability of our laundry detergents. However, there's not necessarily a huge shift in appeal associated with those. Whereas this idea of X% more loads per package does result in increased demand, again showing perhaps a value focus, right? People want to know they're getting more for their money, but also this idea that if I have to replace this item less often, that's ultimately going to be less packaging that I'm disposing of. So with all of that in mind, let's take a look at our leader of the pack in laundry detergent. And it is probably not a surprise that in this case, it is Everspring laundry detergent sheets. So I think there's quite a few benefits to be focused on here. Not only this idea that they're taking a product that historically has produced a lot of waste and basically unburdening consumers with this responsibility, right? Because now I can use this, and if it works well, it's a small package I feel better about buying and tossing. Also, it's incredibly more convenient too, right? Like, I'm thinking all of the apartments I've lived in where I've had to juggle large packages of detergent up and downstairs. This makes for a much simpler way for people to do their laundry. And in terms of what people really liked about this product, the Everspring name really stood out. This is a great name. It has good connotations of being good for the planet, smelling fresh, but also this person made a comment, it looks like a brand that's organic. And I think that could come from this name, but also from, again, this really clever placement of a leaf-like shape above the eye, right? In addition, if we look at what's most unique or most different, it comes down to format. And people do seem like they'd be really intrigued to try a product like this, though there is perhaps some doubt that this could work on even, the most difficult stains, though it says so right here that it could. So this is just something to keep in mind, again, like those refill products, that consumers might need the average consumer might need help in terms of gentle nudges that will get them to adopt something like this. So what next? How do we do that, right? All of this, I think, is really good learning, and it was really interesting learning for me. But how can we kind of think about this as we go forward and innovate? And I think one thing that we need to keep in mind is that as we've started to see with this set of data, sustainable propositions are not necessarily the most in demand, right? When looking across the categories we tested, we did do a correlation analysis looking at perceived sustainability in that category by the people's likelihood to purchase. And what we found is that some categories, those two were neck and neck, right? Well aligned. For beer and for soap, there was a very strong correlation. That correlation dropped significantly when we got to salty snacks, and again, significantly yet with laundry detergent. There was really essentially no correlation there, right? So this isn't to say that if you're in the laundry category, don't worry about being sustainable. That is not what we're saying here. But instead, we're saying with purpose or with sustainability, it's all about playing the long game. So within Ipsos Innovation, we've done meta-analyses of various packages, products, concepts that we've tested to understand if sustainability or purpose-focused benefits alone are going to drive innovation adoption, right? Will they drive me to purchase that? And the answer is not directly. Right? We don't necessarily see a super strong correlation of purpose and innovation adoption. Where we do see a strong correlation, however, is that purpose can definitely improve brand equity. It's going to drive positive perceptions of the brand, which ultimately is going to get that brand's products in our consideration set, right? So purpose-forward products and packaging are just a long-term means to build brand equity and ultimately adopt new users. And while we're kind of at the midpoint of this cycle right now, I do expect that as people get more savvy and as focuses get more spotlit on sustainability, this cycle is probably going to collapse itself a little bit, right? Where people are going to be looking more for sustainability's sake. But we're not there now. As of today, brands should not be focusing on sustainability as a standalone goal, right? Instead, it needs to be used as a means to better address unmet consumer needs. So take the example of biking to work. I've done it. And while I knew that it was good for the planet, it also had other benefits, right? It got me to work quicker. I didn't have to spend money commuting. And also, it was a built-in exercise. We've seen the same thing with many of the other products we've looked at today. I can still have my Cheetos that I love, but I can feel a little bit better about eating them. Or, okay, I'll make the switch to a sustainable laundry detergent sheet because it's going to make my doing laundry easier. Identifying where sustainability can be used in your category as a co-benefit rather than just the benefit alone is ultimately going to be the key to getting people to adopt to being more sustainable in your category. So in conclusion, kind of three main takeaways from this is that first, perception's not always going to reflect reality. And we saw that with kind of the idea that the believe true gap exists with consumers. We don't always know how to make the most sustainable decision. And more education needs to happen in terms of the brands that are putting out products in order to nudge people closer to that. In addition, there's no one single way to be sustainable. This is a big word with a big definition, and it's going to vary in terms of its definition and importance by category. So in order to bring to market a product that truly has purpose that's meaningful to consumers, you really need to understand the nuances of your category. And finally, purpose is essential, but alone it is not enough to make people change their behavior. People are not making purchase decisions based only on sustainability, even those who are very sustainably minded. There must also be some additional co-benefit. So a cheaper, a tastier, a more convenient product, for instance, to improve adoption. So with that, we're at the end of my presented material, and I also realize we're almost at the end of time. And in order to not shortchange, let's see, any of the questions I see here, we will respond to those via email. But in the meantime, I do want to thank you, everybody, for your time today, and would encourage you to reach out to me. My Ipsos email address is on the screen, or to your Ipsos representative for more information. We've done these studies per category, and we're happy to set up additional learning sessions for category deep dives as relevant for you or for your teams. So again, thank you so much. I encourage you to check out any of the documents that we've uploaded to your control panel here, as well as be on the lookout for the webinar recording coming to your email later this week. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great day.